Elias had never expected the Interstellar Council to treat him with anything close to courtesy. The hall stretched farther than any human eye could comfortably take in, a dome of shimmering light and floating platforms where representatives from dozens of alien civilizations murmured among themselves. The air hummed with the subtle buzz of advanced technologies, and everywhere Elias looked, eyes of different shapes, colors, and sizes regarded him with barely concealed curiosity, or in some cases, amusement. Humans were new to this council, and novelty often bred ridicule. As he walked toward the main stage, Elias could feel the weight of centuries of expectation pressing down, not for what humans could do, but for what they could fail to do. Every other representative seemed to glide through the air effortlessly or hover with anti-gravity devices. Elias, by contrast, walked firmly on his own two legs, the human way, clinging to the solid floor as though it were a source of pride. At the center of the stage, the council elders gathered in a semicircle. Their forms were unfamiliar even to Elias after months of preparation. Some had 6 arms, others translucent skin that shimmered with moving patterns, and one even seemed to exist as a cluster of small floating spheres that communicated with pulses of light. The elders spoke in unison, their voices translating instantly into the universal language through his suit's neural interface. "And now, human delegate," one elder said, its voice smooth and cold, "you shall be entrusted with a matter of considerable interest." From behind a shifting screen of luminescent panels, a figure was brought forward. Elias blinked, and his first instinct was disbelief. The being was small, barely the height of a human adolescent, with pale lavender skin and eyes the color of molten gold. Her hair fell in tangled strands around her shoulders, and her posture was hesitant, almost as if she expected to be rebuked at any moment. "This is Lyra," the elder continued, a trace of amusement in its tone that humans would have recognized as condescension. "Former ruler of the planet Urindor Prime. She has recently lost her authority and we present her to you. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." Elias had been briefed on many matters, but this was not what he expected, a fallen ruler. Presented to him as if she were a gift, or perhaps a burden. The other alien delegates chuckled softly, their sounds reverberating like strange wind instruments. Elias sensed the cruelty embedded in the act. They expected him to fumble, to make a mistake, or to treat Lyra as less than herself. Elias stepped forward. "Lyra," he said gently, lowering his voice so that only she could hear, "I'm Elias. I don't care what others think. I'll listen to you and we'll figure this out together." Lyra flinched slightly, not from fear, but from surprise. No one had spoken to her that way in what seemed like ages. Her voice was quiet, hesitant, yet something in it sparked when she replied, You don't think I am useless." "I don't think anything about you except that you are capable," Elias said. "Let's start there." The council elders whispered among themselves, clearly amused at this turn. Elias, a human, had just refused the trap laid before him. He could feel eyes on him, calculating, waiting for him to falter. But Elias did not falter. Instead, he gestured for Lyra to join him on a smaller platform at the center, where they could talk more privately. Over the next few hours, Elias and Lyra walked the platform together. He asked her simple questions, her interests, her experiences leading her people, the challenges she faced. Lyra spoke slowly at first, careful with every word. The story she told was not of defeat, but of betrayal and misunderstanding. Her closest advisors had conspired against her, spreading lies that left her authority in ruins. Elias listened carefully, asking questions not to interrogate but to understand. "You see," Elias said after she recounted her tale, "losing power does not mean losing value. You still have knowledge, still have vision. That is what matters, not the opinions of those who acted against you." Lyra's golden eyes shone with a flicker of hope. Most people would not say that. They would mock me or worse, ignore me. That is why I am here, Elias replied with a small smile. I will not ignore you. I will not mock you, and together we can find a way forward. The council was restless. Whispers grew louder as delegates began to murmur amongst themselves. They had expected Elias to stumble, to show that humans could not handle such complex politics. Instead, he had shown calm, insight, and a capacity for empathy that none of them anticipated. Even the floating sphere elder tilted slightly, as if in grudging admiration. As the hours passed, Elias began to introduce small exercises to test Lyra's strengths. They worked on scenarios, negotiating trade between two alien planets, resolving disputes over resources, and understanding cultural traditions. Elias encouraged Lyra to speak first, to take initiative, and to trust her instincts. She began to respond, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. At one point, Lyra paused, watching Elias with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. Humans are strange. You do not judge so quickly. You listen. Listening is often more powerful than speaking, Elias said. It allows us to see what others cannot. By the end of the day, Lyra had grown visibly taller in her own posture, her shoulders straighter, her gaze firmer. The council members were stunned to see the fallen ruler begin to reclaim her presence. Where they expected weakness, they saw emerging strength, and it was all guided by a human who, in their eyes, should not have mattered. As the platform descended and the audience dispersed, Elias turned to Lyra. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we begin building a plan. There is much to do, and the galaxy does not wait for hesitation. Lyra nodded, feeling a weight lift from her chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen not as a failure, but as a leader with potential. That night, as the council halls dimmed and the alien delegates returned to their quarters, whispers spread about the human who had been given a cruel trick and had turned it into an opportunity. Elias had done something no one expected. He had recognized value where others saw weakness. And in doing so, he had planted the seeds of respect, not just for Lyra, but for humans across the galaxy. As he looked out at the glowing city beyond the council's dome, Elias knew the road ahead would not be easy. The aliens would continue to test, to doubt, and to challenge. But he had confidence in one simple truth. With empathy, intelligence, and patience, humans could rise, not through power, but through understanding, guidance, and the quiet insistence that potential matters more than appearances. Lyra slept that night with a sense of hope she had not felt in years. And Elias, standing watch over the city lights, understood that the first step toward elevating a civilization, or a ruler, was often as simple as believing in them when no one else would. The universe had offered a cruel trick, but Elias and Lyra were about to turn it into something far greater, a partnership that could change the perception of humans forever. And in the quiet hum of the alien city, that partnership began. The morning sunlight of Urindor Prime filtered through the translucent domes of the city, casting soft, shimmering patterns on the polished floors. The interstellar council chambers were quiet, but the echoes of yesterday's events still lingered. Whispers traveled among the alien delegates, who lingered in small clusters, exchanging incredulous glances. Elias arrived early, his footsteps steady and confident. He did not need the council's approval, he only needed to be ready for Lyra. Lyra was already awake, pacing the small quarters allocated to her. Her golden eyes reflected a mix of anxiety and determination. She had slept more than she realized, but the sleep had brought clarity. The weight of betrayal still clung to her, yet something inside had shifted. For the first time, she felt she had an ally, not just a guide, but someone who believed in her without condition. Elias entered, his presence calm and reassuring. "Good morning," he said simply. "Are you ready to continue?" Lyra paused and smiled faintly. "I think I am, but I feel the council is watching. I feel their doubt. I feel them expecting me to fail." "That is true," Elias said. They do expect it, but that is why we must move carefully. They want spectacle. We will give them progress. They began their day with simple exercises, small challenges that tested not only Lyra's knowledge but also her creativity. Elias would propose scenarios: a trade dispute between two planets over rare minerals, a communication breakdown between two species with different perception of time, a dilemma involving environmental management on a shared moon. Lyra approached each scenario cautiously at first. She hesitated, analyzing the details, listening to Elias' guidance. His human methods were different from the alien approaches she was accustomed to. They focused less on hierarchy and more on collaboration, less on proving dominance and more on problem-solving. Slowly, she began to understand not just the answers, but the methods behind them. "What would you do if your people disagreed with your decision?" Elias asked during one session. Lyra thought carefully. "I would listen. I would seek to understand why they disagree. I cannot lead blindly. Leadership, it is not only about command, it is about trust." Elias nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Trust is more powerful than authority. Authority can be taken, but trust must be earned. And it is earned through understanding and respect." The day passed with similar exercises, and slowly Lyra began to shine. She offered solutions that were not only practical but innovative. She suggested compromise strategies that combined resources and culture in ways the aliens present had never considered. Small murmurs of admiration began to ripple through the council. Aliens who had mocked the human and the fallen ruler were forced to pause and reconsider. During a break, Lyra and Elias walked through the city, observing life outside the council. The streets were filled with beings of all shapes and sizes, bustling with energy and purpose. Markets overflowed with colorful goods, and floating vehicles glided above the walkways. Children of different species played together, unbothered by the prejudices that sometimes afflicted the adults. "Humans, you see things differently," Lyra said as they paused to watch a small group of alien children trading a game. "You notice what matters. You notice potential, not status." Elias smiled. "It is easy to overlook what is most important. The universe is full of noise, of distractions, but potential, courage, and kindness, they are the forces that endure. Everything else is temporary." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand now. My fall was not the end. It was an opportunity to see what matters. And perhaps to do better." Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Exactly, and we will do better together. You have skills and vision that are rare, and the council will eventually see it. Step by step, not all at once." As they returned to the council chambers, they faced their first significant test. A dispute had arisen between two alien delegates over the allocation of a newly discovered energy source on a neutral planet. Both delegates were vocal, refusing to compromise, and their arguments had escalated tensions in the council. Elias turned to Lyra. "This is your moment," he said gently. "You have learned, observed, and prepared. Speak honestly, speak wisely." Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice was calm, firm, and respectful. She outlined a solution that combined the needs of both parties, offering a phased allocation plan that included shared management and periodic review. She explained the reasoning step by step, addressing concerns without dismissing them. The council murmured in surprise. The delegates involved paused, considering her words. For the first time, a fallen ruler, the one they had intended as a mockery, was guiding the council with authority, not through force, but through insight and fairness. By the end of the day, whispers had grown into conversations. Some delegates approached Elias privately, curiosity and cautious admiration in their voices. Others observed Lyra from a distance, reluctant to acknowledge her influence but unable to ignore it. That evening, Lyra and Elias reviewed the day's progress. Lyra's confidence had grown visibly. Her shoulders were straighter, her steps surer. She realized that leadership was not about fear or dominance, but about understanding, listening, and acting decisively when necessary. "Elias," she said softly, "I feel different. I feel capable. For the first time in months, I do not feel lost." "You are not lost," Elias replied. "You were only waiting for the right guidance, and you have it now both from me and from yourself." Lyra's eyes glimmered with quiet determination. "Tomorrow, we will show them more. Not for them, but for what can be done. Not for pride, but for progress." The next few days were filled with similar growth. Lyra took on small responsibilities, guiding discussions, proposing ideas for trade, environmental conservation, and cultural exchange. She demonstrated that collaboration, respect, and human-guided strategy could achieve results more effectively than traditional alien methods. Aliens who had once sneered now nodded in acknowledgement, though some remained reluctant to admit it openly. Their perception of humans was slowly shifting. Elias noticed the change, subtle but significant. Humans had been underestimated, yet here they were, elevating not just a fallen ruler but entire discussions in the council. One afternoon, Lyra and Elias were called to observe a dispute over a newly discovered agricultural planet. The council expected chaos, but Elias leaned close and whispered, "Remember what you've learned. Listen first, speak second." Lyra did exactly that. She allowed the delegates to present their arguments fully, then proposed a solution that balanced environmental protection with resource utilization. She even suggested creating a shared council of experts from multiple species to oversee the plan, a novel idea that impressed even the most skeptical delegates. By the time the day ended, Lyra had earned her first official recognition, a symbolic title of Council Advisor for Resource Harmony. It was not full reinstatement of power, but it was a start. More importantly, it marked the beginning of a change in attitude among the council members. That evening, Elias and Lyra walked along the observation deck, looking out over the glowing city. The lights shimmered like stars brought to the ground, and the soft hum of alien technology created a calm atmosphere. "You have changed," Elias said quietly, "not just in ability but in presence. People listen to you differently now. They see potential." Lyra smiled, a faint glow of pride warming her features. "I feel different, I feel seen, and I think I can do more than I ever imagined." Elias nodded. "That is the power of belief and guidance. Humans are not always the strongest or the fastest, but we notice, we guide, and we inspire. And in doing so, we lift others higher than they thought possible." Lyra considered his words, letting them sink in. "Then, together, we can do much, perhaps more than anyone expected." The Interstellar Council had offered a cruel trick, but Elias and Lyra were transforming it into an opportunity. Each small success, each demonstration of intelligence and empathy was a quiet revolution. Aliens would remember the human who refused mockery and the fallen ruler who rose under his guidance. As night fell, Lyra stood alone for a moment, looking out at the city below. The memory of her betrayal still lingered, but it was no longer a chain. It had become a lesson. She realized that leadership was not something taken by force. It was something nurtured, cultivated, and earned. And with Elias by her side, she could rise higher than even she had imagined. In the quiet hum of the observation deck, the partnership between human and alien ruler grew stronger. Small victories had become tangible results, and the council began to take notice. But this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and challenges awaited that would test not just Lyra's abilities, but the human ingenuity and wisdom that guided her. Together, they had begun to rewrite expectations. And in doing so, they were setting the stage for a story that would be remembered, not for cruelty or mockery, but for the quiet, steadfast rise of potential, belief, and collaboration. The night ended with Lyra standing taller, her gaze firm, her mind alive with ideas. Elias watched her silently, knowing that the path ahead would be filled with more tests, more obstacles, and more skeptics. But he also knew that humans had a unique way of turning challenges into opportunities, and with patience, empathy, and insight, they could elevate not just rulers but entire civilizations. Tomorrow, they would face the council again. Tomorrow, Lyra would step further into her role. And tomorrow, the galaxy would see that sometimes, the greatest power is the one quietly nurtured by belief, guidance, and understanding. The days that followed were unlike anything Lyra had ever experienced. Each morning she awoke with a sense of purpose, a spark that had been missing for months. Elias had become more than a guide. He was a quiet anchor, a steady presence reminding her that leadership was not about dominance, but about wisdom, patience, and understanding. The Interstellar Council, which had once seen her as a fallen, powerless figure, now watched her closely, curiosity mixing with caution in equal measure. One morning, the council called an emergency session. A neighboring planet, Corellis, was facing a crisis of trade and resource management. Its two largest cities relied on a shared river for water, but disputes had escalated into months of inefficiency. Aliens from Corellis sent representatives to negotiate, but progress had stalled. The council expected confusion, discord, and perhaps embarrassment if the humans tried to intervene. Elias and Lyra stepped onto the central platform together. Lyra's posture was firm, her golden eyes scanning the assembly with calm confidence. Elias gave her a reassuring nod. "Listen first," he whispered, "then speak from what you know." Lyra nodded. She turned to the Corellis representatives, inviting them to explain their positions fully. They were wary, defensive, and slightly dismissive at first. But Lyra did not interrupt or argue. She simply listened, taking careful notes, watching their gestures and listening to their tones. She noticed small patterns, the way they repeated certain phrases, the points that caused the most hesitation, the words that hinted at compromise. When the representatives had finished, Lyra spoke. Her voice was steady, measured, and respectful. "I understand the challenges you face. The river sustains both your cities and its health is critical. But solutions exist that do not require one city to lose while the other wins. There are ways to share, to cooperate, and to innovate so that both communities thrive." The council murmured. Some delegates exchanged surprised glances. They had expected argument, not diplomacy, from a human-guided effort. Lyra continued, proposing a rotating system of water usage combined with shared conservation projects. She suggested that a team of engineers from both cities and advisors from the council collaborate to monitor the river, ensuring fairness and sustainability. One of the Corellis delegates, a tall being with crystalline skin, spoke skeptically. "And why should we trust a solution offered by a human-guided ruler who was once powerless?" Lyra did not flinch. Instead, she smiled gently. "Because the solution works and because cooperation works, authority without understanding is meaningless. My role is not to enforce but to facilitate a solution that benefits everyone." After tense moments, the delegates agreed to trial the proposal. Slowly, carefully, they began to negotiate, guided by Lyra's calm presence. Elias watched quietly, proud but unobtrusive. The solution was not perfect, but it was progress, and in that council chamber, progress was rare. Word of Lyra's success spread quickly across the galaxy. Reports of a fallen ruler, guided by a human, resolving disputes with fairness and intelligence reached planets that had long dismissed humans as insignificant. Aliens who had once sneered began to reconsider. Small delegations sought Elias' advice, hoping to understand how humans approached problems differently. Lyra and Elias continued their work, not for fame, but for results. They visited planets struggling with trade imbalances, resource shortages, and environmental challenges. Each time, Lyra applied what she had learned, combining her knowledge of alien politics with Elias' human approach to problem solving. and each time they succeeded. The most remarkable moment came when they visited the planet Vierlia, known for its complex energy grid and intricate social hierarchy. Delegates from Vierlia were skeptical, convinced that no outsider could understand their system. Elias and Lyra observed, asked questions, and listened. Then Lyra proposed an adjustment to the energy grid that would improve efficiency, reduce waste, and allow more equitable access. The Vierlian Council was stunned. They had expected outsiders to fail, to misunderstand, or to oversimplify. Instead, they saw a human-guided ruler, combining observation, intelligence, and empathy to solve a problem that had confounded their experts for decades. Lyra's reputation grew steadily. She was no longer seen as a fallen figure but as a rising leader, someone capable, insightful, and guided by principles of fairness and understanding. The council began to involve her in larger decisions, and delegates from other civilizations sought her guidance. Through it all, Elias remained a quiet presence. He did not seek recognition or credit. He simply provided insight, asked questions, and helped Lyra refine her thinking. He reminded her to listen, to consider perspectives she had not thought of, and to trust her instincts. Lyra began to internalize these lessons. She discovered that leadership was less about commands and more about influence, less about fear and more about respect. She understood the power of patience, the importance of empathy, and the value of seeing the potential in others. One afternoon, Elias and Lyra were approached by a delegation of alien educators, curious about her methods. "How does she approach problems?" one asked. "How does a human guide make such a difference?" Elias smiled gently. "Humans notice details that others overlook. We focus on understanding, collaboration, and innovation. We guide, we encourage, and we respect the intelligence of those we help. That is what makes the difference." Lyra added, "I have learned that leadership is not about asserting authority. It is about listening, analyzing, and fostering solutions that benefit everyone. Humans taught me that potential is not measured by power alone, but by vision and collaboration." As the weeks passed, the council began to adjust. Delegates who had once dismissed humans now approached them with questions, eager to understand their perspective. The cruel trick intended to humiliate a fallen ruler had instead elevated both Lyra and Elias. Their partnership became a model of how intelligence, respect, and guidance could change outcomes. But not everyone was pleased. Some factions, threatened by the growing influence of a human-guided ruler, whispered doubts and tried to undermine her progress. They questioned her decisions, spread rumors, and tested the limits of her patience. Yet each challenge only strengthened Lyra's resolve. With Elias by her side, she navigated difficulties with calm determination. One evening, as they reviewed plans for interstellar collaboration, Lyra paused and looked at Elias. "Do you think humans are ready for more?" she asked softly. "To be seen not just as newcomers but as equals?" Elias nodded. "Yes, but it takes time. Respect is earned, not demanded, and humans, when they act with integrity and insight, can earn it faster than most expect." Lyra smiled. "Then we continue, not for recognition, not for praise, but for progress, for understanding, for what can be achieved when we work together." The council soon began to invite Lyra and Elias to larger forums, where multiple civilizations gathered to discuss interstellar projects. Lyra spoke with clarity, proposing innovative solutions for trade, resource management, and cultural exchange. Her ideas were practical, fair, and often surprisingly creative. Delegates began to respect her not because of her title, but because of her insight. Elias observed quietly, proud but unassuming. He understood that humans were often underestimated because they approached challenges differently. They valued empathy, observation, and collaboration over force, spectacle, or intimidation. And in a galaxy where power and appearance often overshadowed substance, that difference was a quiet but formidable strength. One particular project involved establishing a shared network of research stations across multiple planets. Previous council attempts had failed due to disputes, mismanagement, and cultural misunderstandings. Lyra, guided by Elias' methods, proposed a new approach: shared leadership, transparent communication, and joint responsibility. She emphasized collaboration over hierarchy and problem-solving over blame. The council hesitated, expecting disputes, resistance, or delays. Instead, the proposal was met with cautious optimism. Delegates began to see the benefits of Lyra's approach, and the project moved forward successfully. The result was a visible shift in the council's dynamics. Aliens who had once been dismissive of humans now approached them with questions and requests for advice. Lyra's reputation grew alongside Elias' quiet recognition as a guide and strategist. Together, they demonstrated that intelligence, patience, and respect could achieve results that brute authority never could. Lyra also discovered the personal impact of Elias' guidance. She had grown more confident, more decisive, and more attuned to the needs of those she served. She began to mentor others, sharing insights, encouraging collaboration, and fostering innovation among younger delegates. The ripple effect of human-guided wisdom spread quietly but steadily across the galaxy. One evening, as they watched the twin suns set over the council city, Lyra spoke softly. "Elias, do you think, perhaps the universe is beginning to understand humans? Not as a curiosity, but as capable allies." Elias smiled, watching the suns dip below the horizon. "I think they are beginning to see what humans always knew. That potential is not measured by force, but by vision, collaboration, and understanding. And when humans believe in someone, they can help them rise higher than anyone expected." Lyra nodded, a sense of quiet satisfaction filling her chest. The galaxy had underestimated her, underestimated Elias, and underestimated humans. But they were changing perceptions, one success at a time. And together, they would continue to demonstrate that leadership was not about cruelty or domination, but about insight, respect, and the power of belief. The council may have offered a cruel trick, but Elias and Lyra had transformed it into a lesson for the galaxy. It was a lesson in empathy, strategy, and the quiet strength of human guidance. Every planet they visited, every council session they influenced, and every decision they shaped carried that lesson forward. By the end of this part of their journey, Lyra was no longer just a fallen ruler. She had become a leader of vision, a symbol of potential realized through understanding. And Elias, the human who had been underestimated, had proven that humans could inspire, guide, and elevate not through force, but through intelligence, empathy, and unwavering belief in the possibilities of others. The galaxy was beginning to take notice. And for Lyra, Elias, and all those who would follow their example, this was only the beginning. The morning light of the Interstellar Council's grand city fell across the domes like liquid gold. Lyra stood on the observation platform, gazing at the bustling activity below. Ships glided between towers, representatives moved along the walkways, and the hum of interstellar communication filled the air. For her, the view was no longer intimidating. It was familiar, full of possibilities. Beside her, Elias watched quietly. He had never sought recognition, yet the council now saw him as more than a human delegate. He was the strategist, the guide, the quiet force behind Lyra's rise. Together, they had turned a cruel trick into a story of collaboration and hope. And today, that story would reach its next stage. A summons came from the council elders. Lyra was to speak at a major convocation, where leaders from dozens of civilizations would gather to discuss interstellar cooperation, trade, and technological advancement. This would be her first time addressing such a vast audience, not as a representative of a fallen ruler, but as a recognized leader. As they approached the platform, Lyra felt a flicker of nerves, though it was different from the fear she had once known. This was responsibility, not shame. She took a deep breath, feeling Elia's steady presence beside her. "Remember," he whispered, "speak from what you know. Listen, then share, trust yourself." Lyra nodded. When she stepped forward, the room fell silent. Hundreds of delegates, many of whom had once dismissed humans as insignificant, now looked at her with anticipation. "Esteemed leaders of the Council, representatives of countless civilizations," Lyra began, her voice calm and clear, "we are gathered here not to assert power but to explore possibilities. We are here to find solutions that benefit all, to share knowledge, and to foster cooperation that extends beyond borders, species, or planets." She paused, letting her words sink in. Many delegates had never heard a speech so measured, so focused not on authority but on collaboration. She spoke of challenges that had once divided planets, resource disputes, communication barriers, and environmental concerns. But instead of highlighting failure, she presented solutions, practical, fair, and innovative. Delegates listened intently as she explained systems for shared resource management, interplanetary trade agreements, and cooperative research networks. Her proposals were not theoretical. They were grounded in experience, in observation, and in the lessons she had learned under Elia's guidance. One by one, she addressed concerns raised by skeptical delegates. She acknowledged potential difficulties, emphasized transparency, and proposed mechanisms for collaboration and accountability. Where others expected arrogance or fear, she offered understanding and vision. By the time she finished, a quiet hum of approval spread through the chamber. The council elders, who had once offered her as a cruel trick, nodded with a mix of surprise and respect. Lyra's rise was undeniable. After the convocation, Elias and Lyra walked through the city streets, observing reactions from citizens and delegates alike. Many approached them with curiosity, asking questions about their methods, their strategies, and their perspective on leadership. Lyra answered patiently, sharing lessons she had learned while emphasizing collaboration and respect. "We never imagined humans could guide like this," one alien delegate admitted. "We expected chaos or incompetence. Instead, we see understanding, foresight, and patience." "You have changed our view," Elias smiled quietly. "Humans often approach problems differently. We notice details, we listen, and we guide. It is not force that shapes outcomes, but insight and empathy." Lyra added, "Leadership is not about taking power. It is about fostering solutions, creating trust, and inspiring others to do their best. Humans taught me that potential is not measured by authority alone, but by action guided by understanding." Over the following weeks, Lyra's influence grew. She traveled to multiple planets, overseeing projects that improved trade, technology, and environmental management. She established councils of experts from various civilizations, creating systems where knowledge could be shared freely and disputes could be resolved without conflict. Each success reinforced her reputation, not as a ruler restored by force, but as a leader elevated by wisdom and collaboration. Elias remained at her side, quietly observing, advising, and encouraging. He reminded her of the human principles that had guided their work: patience, listening, and the recognition of potential in others. Under his guidance, Lyra developed a leadership style that was both compassionate and effective, earning her admiration across the galaxy. One significant challenge arose when the planet Silvara faced a drought affecting multiple cities. Traditional methods had failed, and tensions were high. Lyra and Elias were called to mediate. They worked with local leaders, combining scientific knowledge with strategic planning. Lyra proposed a system of water sharing, innovative irrigation techniques, and cooperative governance that allowed each city to maintain autonomy while ensuring sustainability. The solution succeeded, and word of it spread quickly. Lyra's reputation as a problem solver grew, and the human influence guiding her became more widely recognized. Even previously skeptical civilizations began to seek their counsel. As her leadership strengthened, Lyra also took time to mentor others. She shared lessons about collaboration, empathy, and problem-solving. Young leaders, from humans and aliens alike, found in her a model of guidance that combined wisdom with humility. She encouraged them to trust in potential, to observe carefully, and to act decisively when necessary. One evening, while overlooking a glittering city of floating towers, Lyra spoke with Elias. "I never imagined that a human could teach me so much," she said softly. "Not just about problem-solving, but about leadership, about trust, about seeing potential where others see failure." Elias smiled. "Humans are often underestimated because our strength is quiet. We guide, we observe, we nurture. Force may win battles, but understanding shapes civilizations." Lyra nodded. "I feel stronger, not because of power, but because of understanding, because of guidance, because of belief." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "And that is what elevates leaders. That is what elevates civilizations. Together, we have shown that strength is not always measured in titles or armies, but in wisdom, empathy, and perseverance." The council soon acknowledged Lyra's accomplishments formally. She was no longer considered a fallen ruler. She was recognized as a visionary leader whose insight had reshaped multiple planetary systems. The aliens who had once mocked the human who guided her now extended respect, curiosity, and collaboration. Humans, long underestimated, were beginning to earn their place as allies and innovators in interstellar affairs. Lyra's final transformation was not sudden, but steady. She had gained confidence, earned respect, and cultivated influence not through force or fear, but through intelligence, patience, and understanding. Her journey from a fallen ruler to a respected leader was a testament to the power of guidance, belief, and collaboration. As the sun set on the council city, casting warm light across the domes and streets, Lyra and Elias stood together on the observation platform. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and full of possibilities. They had turned a cruel trick into a story of hope, of achievement, and of inspiration. "Do you think they understand now?" Lyra asked, watching ships glide across the horizon. "Do they see humans differently?" Elias nodded. "Yes, slowly but surely. They see that humans notice, that we guide, that we can elevate others through understanding. And in doing so, we change the universe, not through force but through insight." Lyra smiled. "Then we continue. Not for fame, not for recognition, but for progress, for understanding, and for what can be achieved when beings work together." In the weeks that followed, Lyra's initiatives expanded further. She implemented collaborative programs across multiple civilizations, established councils for resource management, and encouraged knowledge-sharing networks. Delegates who had once doubted humans now sought guidance, eager to learn from their approach. The galaxy began to recognize that leadership could be shaped by wisdom, empathy, and innovation, not only by power or dominance. Lyra's rise became a symbol, a story told in council halls and classrooms across planets. Young leaders, both human and alien, studied her methods, learning the value of listening, collaboration, and guidance. The galaxy had witnessed the quiet strength of a human who refused to follow cruelty with cruelty, and the ruler who rose not by reclaiming force, but by embracing understanding. Elias watched her with quiet pride. The human journey, so often underestimated, had left a lasting mark. Through patience, insight, and belief in potential, humans could elevate leaders, civilizations, and even the way the galaxy approached challenges. Lyra, standing on the observation deck, no longer felt the shadow of betrayal. She had learned that leadership was not about reclaiming what was lost, but about creating something new, something better. She had been elevated not by chance, but by wisdom, collaboration, and the quiet guidance of a human who believed in potential when others would not. The galaxy would remember the story of a fallen ruler guided by a human who rose higher than anyone had expected. And the lesson was clear. Potential is universal, and with understanding, patience, and belief, anyone can reach heights beyond imagination. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Lyra and Elias looked out over the glittering city, knowing their work was far from finished. There were challenges still ahead, planets still in need, and civilizations still learning to cooperate. But for now, they had achieved something extraordinary. Together, they had shown the power of quiet wisdom, the strength of belief, and the lasting impact of humans who refuse to let cruelty define the universe. And in that moment, the galaxy seemed just a little brighter, filled with the promise of what could be achieved when beings work together, not through fear, but through understanding, respect, and hope.